And there are a lot of different reasons why someone might choose to be a tutor for Washtenaw Literacy. I have two reasons, as a matter of fact. My first reason is that I went there the first time as a learner. My name is Blair, and I was an adult that couldn't read. I was an auto worker, and if I had a legal contract I had to sign, well, I'd act as if I was in a hurry and kind of mad and just say, listen, I don't have time for this. Why don't you just tell me what's in it? And then I'd sign on the dotted line and hope they didn't cheat me. If somebody recommended, hey, this is a really great book, well, if they hadn't made it into a movie, I'd call up the library and say, my 12-year-old wants to read this book, and I wondered if it was appropriate. And they'd usually give me enough of a synopsis to where I could fake having read the book. Of course, eventually it just became harder to cover than it would be to just learn how to read. And that's why I went to Washtenaw Literacy. I felt like the best way to give back after I had learned to read would be to become a tutor. Now, you don't remember all of the people that you've worked with over the years, but I remember Bob, partly because he was older than I am now when he came to us. I should tell you that a lot of the people that come in, they develop small idiosyncrasies, little superstitions. We had one gal that had a very good session wearing a particular sweater, and then thereafter, every appointment, she wore that sweater. I had one fellow that brought in a little Kennedy $50, and when the going got rough, he'd work that coin. I think he just about rubbed JFK bald-headed. But Bob's thing was the readers. You know, those little inexpensive glasses that you get at the drugstore? And every week, he came in with a different pair. Of course, you don't say anything about that, because it's a big deal when we get to that point. The lesson's actually the third point. First, it's when they'll call and make the appointment. Second, it's when they make the appointment, when they arrive. If they'll do that, we can usually get them through step 3, where we teach them how to read. Well, Bob eventually gave me that moment, the other reason why I'm a tutor, and it's the aha moment. That point where all those squiggles and symbols come together and form an idea conveyed from one person to another. You should have seen the look on his face. He was so proud. But you want to know the funny thing about it? After the aha moment, sometimes we don't see them so much anymore. And they're ready to go on with their learning by themselves, and that's fine. That's what we're here for, because there's nothing better than just taking off the training wheels and just giving them that first push. Sometimes we'll get a postcard from someone saying, hey, remember I had to learn how to read so I could get that job? Well, I got that job. Sometimes we find out somebody got married or had a baby, but I didn't hear anything about Bob for 6 months, maybe a year. And when I finally did hear something, it was one of the other tutors. He came in and said, hey, did you hear it? And Bob had passed away. He'd seen it in the paper the day before, so I got a copy. I looked up the death notice, and I found that his funeral was that very day. Well, I decided that even though I wasn't actually dressed for it, I was going to go over on my lunch hour and pay my respects. When I got over to the chapel, it was full, so I just stood in the back, which I had intended to do anyway. And then a woman in the front row, she turned around and she scanned the crowd, and when she saw me, she stood up and walked right directly to me. I thought maybe she thought I was dressed inappropriately as well, but that wasn't it. She said, are you Blair? Now, this woman was not a psychic. Perhaps I should have told you that Bob was an African-American man, and I stuck out in that chapel like a sore thumb, a sore, white, poorly dressed thumb. But I told her that I was Blair, and she introduced herself. It was Bob's daughter, and she says, there's someone I want you to meet. She took me up to the front row and introduced me to Bob's widow, Eva. And Eva stood up and she hugged me. And she told me, you meant so much to Bob in the last years of his life. I met 2 of his brothers, one of his sons. It was wonderful. Every one of them had heard about the work that Bob and Blair had done together. And then after I'd met the family, his daughter said, well, would you like to walk up to the casket and say your goodbyes? I don't normally do that. I don't feel comfortable doing that. But I was already at the front of the chapel, and I couldn't think of a polite way to say no, so I did. But in this case, I was glad that I did. In the pocket of his suit coat was a pair of readers. I don't know if he thought that maybe there were going to be road signs on the way to heaven, or if he decided maybe he wanted to discuss the finer points of Huckleberry Finn with Mark Twain himself, but just because Bob's life was over, his reading journey wasn't over. That's why we asked you to give to Washtenaw Literacy, for people like Bob and for people like me.